Everybody doing all right? Good crowd tonight. I'm wondering where in the heck are you all coming from? So we're so glad that you are here. So for a couple of months now, we have been in a series that I've titled Steps to Spiritual Growth. And we've been talking about spiritual disciplines or things that we can do to open ourselves up to what God wants to do in our life. And I know that we have many people who've been reading a book along with it. We no longer have any of the books, but it's an excellent book titled The Life You've Always Wanted by John Ortberg. And this week, the spiritual discipline that we're coming to is an interesting one. And so I put the title chapter on the screen for you. We're in chapter 10 if you are reading along. And the title for that chapter is A Life of Freedom, the Practice of Secrecy. And my guess is that nobody has really thought of the idea of secrecy, and we'll unpack that a little bit, as a spiritual discipline. But I want to give you forewarning, if you haven't already heard, that really what our message is about is going to be about this idea that many of us have become addicted to the approval of other people. And that for many of us, we deal with issues of self-worth and issues that constantly drive us to try to get the approval of other people in our life. So I'm giving you a forewarning. If that's a touchy topic for you, that's what we're tackling this morning. I got a joke to start with. And first two services, I apologized for this joke, but I'm not going to do it today at this service because it fits this service very well, I guess. I don't know. You can be the judge. So a guy has been feeling down for so long that he finally decided to seek the aid of a psychiatrist. He went there, he laid on the couch, spilled his guts, then waited for the profound wisdom of the psychiatrist to make him feel better. The psychiatrist asked him a few questions, took some notes, then he sat thinking in silence for a few minutes with a puzzled look on his face. Suddenly he looked up like a light bulb went on, and he had this expression of delight, and he said, "Oh, I think I know what your problem is. Your problem is low self-esteem. It's very common among losers." Ouch, yeah. So that was not good psychiatric help. So just to be clear, that's not what I believe is good psychiatric help. So we're going to start with our question. If you've never been here before, we ask a question every week, and you are invited to answer it. What approval is important to you, or do you long for or desire? These guys bring microphones around if you'd like to answer the question. We need you to get their attention. You stand up, give us a brief answer, speak directly into the mic. And here's what I want to do before we start, is I want to take the Sunday school answer off the table. So I'm not looking for you to stand up and say God or Jesus, okay? And we know that's true. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But literally what I'm asking is if you'd like to answer the question, if you would help us kind of establish some of the kinds of people in our lives that we do look for approval from. Maybe we've had that approval and it's meant something to us, or maybe we're really still desiring it or longing for it in our hearts. So here we go. Whose approval is important to you, or do you long for or desire?
Morning, family. My name's Alan. I'm a firm believer. Well, just the long path that I've gone down. My biggest approval that I'm seeking is my own. I just don't trust myself, the choices I've made, the life I've lived, and I just want to get to the point where I trust myself. So with that, thank you.
Yep, thank you, Alan. Excellent. That'll connect with lots of people. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, hi, my name is Mary. It used to be my mom and dad, but they're both deceased. I would say it's pretty much close friends that I have that I'd like approval from, that I'm doing a good job or whatever I'm doing, and of course, Pastor Dale. Because he's known me a long time, and he can judge my growth backwards or forwards probably better than anybody I know.
Well, thank you. That's a heavy burden. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jamie. I guess, real quick, in the past, I always sought approval from my using friends, trying to flatter with drugs and alcohol and whatnot. But today, since Dale took the question off, took the answer off the board, no, I'm just playing. I don't know. I seek approval from the positive people in my life now. Mostly the people that are surrounded in my recovery. The Lighthouse family. My beautiful girlfriend Jessica. Had to put her on the spot. And just like I said, people around me that are positive in my life now.
Thanks, Jamie.
I'm Tim. Good morning. The approval is my mother. She's passed and that, but even though she's up with the big fella up there, I still get a message from her each and every day, and it's very important to me. And I got a lot of people in here, Dale and others in the whole family here. I mean, that's a big family, and it's one heck of a great approval. I don't seek approval because all I do is I just go, I try to do God's work each and every day. I ask for His guidance, ask for my mother's guidance, and I leave the rest up to Him.
Thank you, Tim.
I'm just one of His kids.
Thank you. All right, we can do one or two more, and we'll do Jessica, and then we'll do Misty, and then we're going to wrap it up there. So, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jessica. Excuse me, I have a cold. But the first person I thought about was my dad. And this whole series, when I hit this, it reminded me of the fact that I never quite reached his mark. No matter if I did really well, I could have done just a little bit better. I could have done this differently, and how that carried me on into life, and held me hostage from everybody. I wondered, is this good enough? Is that good enough? And it really stunted my spiritual growth.
Thank you, Jessica. That was excellent. Thank you for sharing that. All right.
Hi everyone, Misty. So I grew up pretty rebellious. I never really sought approval from many people, including my mother, until my mother-in-law got sick. When I think I knew that she was going to pass, I found myself in a really uncomfortable position because I really craved for her approval. I wanted her to know that Sean was going to be in the... I didn't think this was going to be so hard. And I wanted to make sure that Sean was going to be in a good spot. And so I found myself very uncomfortably put in wanting approval of somebody. And so, and I don't care now, it's God. But I know that she's up there with him. And so it was kind of uncomfortable for me to want to seek approval from somebody. And so that was, I guess that's...
All right. Thank you, Misty. Thank you, guys. I'm going to invite you all to grab a Bible and turn to John chapter 12. John chapter 12, page 894, if you're using a church Bible. John chapter 12, page 894. If you are using a recovery Bible, 1362 or 894, John chapter 12. I'd like to read a few verses. Really want to just read one verse, but we're going to read a larger section so you understand the context. This passage comes right after Jesus has gone into Jerusalem, right before he dies on the cross, and so he's really giving some instruction to his followers. And I'm going to begin reading at verse 37, if you could follow along. But despite all the miraculous signs Jesus had done, most of the people still did not believe in him. This is exactly what Isaiah the prophet had predicted. Lord, who has believed our message? To whom has the Lord revealed his powerful arm? But the people couldn't believe, for as Isaiah also said, the Lord has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts so that their eyes cannot see, their hearts cannot understand, and they cannot turn to them and have me heal them. Very difficult passage, interestingly. Isaiah was referring to Jesus when he said this because he saw the future and spoke of the Messiah's glory. Many people did believe in him, however, including some of the Jewish leaders, but they wouldn't admit it for fear that the Pharisees would expel them from the synagogue. I want you to read verse 43 with me out loud. For they loved human praise more than the praise of God. Wow, is that a powerful verse? They loved human praise more than the praise of God. It's a really powerful passage in many ways. I read it, and here's what I wonder. I wonder, is it possible that my need for approval from people may keep me from the life that God has planned for me? Let me ask it more directly to you. Is it possible that your need, your desire for approval from other people, that desire may actually keep you from the life that God has planned for you? Let me approach it in this way. God has a plan for your life, for the person that he desires for you, for me to become the man or woman of God, a person who is free and confident and secure in your own skin and your spiritual relationship with God, and healthy in your relationship with other people. But here's the deal. Your need for approval may be hindering you from becoming the person that you can be. Someone say, ouch. So John Ortberg says that there are a lot of people in this world, and I'm gonna kind of just guess that there are a lot of people in this room who are approval addicts, who struggle searching for the approval of other people. And he writes about that a little bit in the book that I know some of you are reading. I'm going to share what is a long quote from that book. And we put it on the screen. My wife puts the PowerPoint together. I sent it to her, and I think she almost left me because it's really a long quote she had to put in there. But I thought it would be more helpful for you to see it than to just hear it. So here it is. Ortberg writes, I refer to what might be called approval addiction. Some people live in bondage to what other people think of them. The addiction takes many forms. If we find ourselves often getting hurt by what others say about us, by people expressing other than glowing opinions about us, we probably have it. If we habitually compare ourselves with other people, if we find ourselves getting competitive in the most ordinary situations, we probably have it. If we live with a nagging sense that we aren't important enough or special enough, or we get envious of another's success, we probably have it. If we keep trying to impress important people, we probably have it. If we are worried that someone might think ill of us if he or she would find out that we are an approval addict, we probably have it. Like other addicts, we will go to great lengths to get a fix when we feel desperate. Yet, like other addicts, we find that no fix lasts forever, so we keep coming back for more. Then he goes on and quotes an author by the name of Henry Nouwen, he says, Henry Nouwen puts the problem in this perspective. At issue here is the question, to whom do I belong? To God or to the world? Many of my daily preoccupations suggest that I belong more to the world than to God. A little criticism makes me angry, a little rejection makes me depressed, a little praise raises my spirits, and a little success excites me. Often I am like a small boat on the ocean, completely at the mercy of its waves. And so if you are identifying at all with what he just wrote, chances are you struggle a little bit with the need for the approval of other people. And I know with certainty that it's pretty common around this place. You know, I see approval addiction so much in my own life, and I see it oftentimes around this church and in the people of my Lighthouse family. And it's a lot easier to talk about your approval addiction than it is my own. So let me give you a couple of examples. So a few years ago, I went outside one evening here at Lighthouse on the front steps, and there was somebody who was pretty regular around our church at that time, and he was just kind of standing there, kind of watching outside. And I said, "What are you doing?" And there were some people here. There's evening activities going on, and so there were some people outside. There were, a bunch of women out there, and he said, "Oh, this is my favorite time of the week." And I said, "What?" And he said, "You just wait. You got to watch. It's my favorite time of the week." And I said, "Well, what's going to happen?" And he said, "In just a few moments, there will be a van full of guys being shuttled from a local place where they live." And he says, "When the women get here first, my favorite thing of the week is to watch them get off the van, because they do this." Cigarette hanging out of their mouth, and they establish their territory right from the beginning and try to make a good impression. Now, some of you still do that. Some of you might have been the guys I was watching that night. And here's the deal. I told him, "I see what you mean. It's pretty entertaining." Approval addiction. Here's one that I've mentioned before. How many selfies do you have to take? How many selfies do you have to take? And it's almost like we kind of have this need to put our face out there, our picture out there on social media to get people to compliment us, to say something about us. And I've already last night after our worship service started regretting including this in the message, because I'm getting tagged in all of these selfies now. So I can see what I'm going to be doing all week. Or social media kind of reports, I think that there are, reasons to put stuff out that's going on in our life, or victories or successes, but it's almost like I know people who put out these social media kinds of reports that say, "Look how amazing I am," and they wait for people to reply and say, "Yes, indeed, you really, truly are amazing." And if you struggle at all with approval addiction, maybe some of those are things that you maybe need to reevaluate. And so I've kind of been working on saying a prayer every day, and here's the prayer. You can repeat it after me. God, protect me from a big ego. So what is behind this approval addiction? Truthfully, that for most of us, it's not a big ego. For many of you, you have had a life of negative messages that have torn you down and caused you to question your self-worth. It may have started in childhood, or either in your home or in school. It's carried you into adulthood, and the message that you now hear in your head are messages that you tell yourself, like you are a failure, that you are hopeless, that you are a loser, that you will never amount to anything, and that you are a screw-up. And here's what happens in our lives. Often, our longing for approval and our people-pleasing, our longing for approval is meant to somehow balance what we already think about ourselves. And so, if that's you, chances are you know exactly what I'm talking about right now. Oftentimes, our need for approval, our addiction to approval, is meant to balance what we already think about ourselves. We compare ourselves to others. We think he's more successful or more well off, or she's prettier or more competent than I am, or that they have life all figured out and I am such a loser. Here's the deal. Nobody has life all figured out. Pretty important to remember. Nobody has life figured out. You know, a phrase that I learned in the recovery world that that we share here pretty regularly. I think it's an important one for us to learn. Why don't you read it with me? It's going to be on the screen. Hopefully. There we go. Don't compare your insides with other people's outsides. Don't compare what you know is going on inside of you with what you see on the outside of other people. And here's why. Next line. Everybody's got stuff you know nothing about. So everybody's dealing with something. It's an important thing for us to remember. Everybody's dealing with something. And, you know, in our context, in our culture here, I know that many people come here who are or have struggled with addiction to something. One of the things that I've learned is that many people who've struggled with addiction to something started at young ages, and they found that it helped them deal with some of the insecurities that they had. By taking that drug or that drink of alcohol, you started to feel normal, maybe for the first time in your life. If that's you, chances are you're still dealing on some level with some of those insecurities. We tend to somehow want to cover up, to balance out those things that we feel about ourselves, and we look to other people to do that. If you struggle with codependency in any way, chances are you are a people pleaser. How many people pleasers are here willing to admit it? If you are a people pleaser, chances are you know it, and chances are it gets you into trouble. One of the things that I have found in our church, in our culture, is that many people are looking for that sense of balance in their life to balance out some of the insecurities in relationship after relationship after relationship. And you never find it. What we're talking about is trying to find that sense of balance within ourselves. That's what we're talking about today. The need for approval drives something in many of us that we need to deal with. I've talked a lot about my own cycle of shame, shame that came from my own alcoholism and the mistakes that I had made in my life. And that kept me sick for quite a while. For some of you, shame is keeping you sick. And it's this need that you now have in your life to somehow see if you can balance out those things that you're telling yourself about the mistakes that you've made in life. Learned this a long time ago. I'm going to share it again. I've shared it before. It was so helpful for me to learn the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is, I'm a human being who does bad things. Shame is, I'm a bad person. The first one is of God. God has put in us a conscience, and chances are, generally, you know when you've done a bad thing. And that's actually a voice of the Spirit of God that kind of is meant to guide us in a different direction. Shame is not of God. Shame is, I'm a bad person. And there is not a bad person in here because God doesn't make bad people. God makes good people who sometimes do bad things. And so that was helpful to me to kind of learn that I need to kind of shift that balance. And if you've been looking for the approval of others in order to combat shame and make you feel better about yourself, you're looking in the wrong place. It is a relationship that can bring that healing into your life, but it's a relationship with the God who's already madly in love with you. It's a relationship with the one who has created you and redeemed you. Shame at its core is built on our need for approval. To be human, my friends, is to make mistakes. Amen? We all make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does some bad things. Even sometimes people do stupid things. Anybody here ever do a stupid thing? Who am I asking? Yeah. We say that the only thing that we don't allow here at Lighthouse Church is perfect people. Just a heads up. We know that there is no such thing as a perfect person. So what we're actually saying is that there are no perfect people, and you don't have to pretend that you are one when you're here. People make mistakes. People sin. We all do. Jesus died on the cross for your sins and my sins. Jesus died on the cross for all of them. We tend to rank them. We tend to rank people's sins like, well, at least I'm not as bad as that person. You know, their sins are a lot worse than mine, or mine are so bad that nobody will understand. But here's the deal. From the cross, Jesus sees all the sins of the world the same. All he sees is sin. All he sees is sinners worth redeeming, sinners worth dying on the cross for. And so there is nothing that you have done that is beyond the redemption and the power of our Lord Jesus Christ and what he has done on the cross for you and me. I want us all to admit something. I want us all to admit that we do care about what others think about us. Turn and tell someone, I do. Truthfully, on some level, we should care about what other people think about us. But I think there is this line that gets crossed in many of our lives where we think way too much about what other people are thinking about us. For many of us, it kind of stems from childhood. I have met with people my age and older, which is old, and who are still trying to figure out how they can get mom or dad's approval. Sometimes they're not even living anymore, but they still want mom or dad's approval. My parents weren't too good at sharing feelings or approval. They just sucked at it, honestly. They just weren't very good at it. And, it was interesting. My dad died I think it was 12, 13 years ago. And his funeral was in Bismarck, and my family was in Bismarck, of course, for the funeral. The night before at the funeral home, we had some visitation time and a prayer gathering. And my dad's coffee and golf buddies showed up. And it was a group of guys that I had gotten to know. And they ended up chatting with my son, Andrew, who was in 9th grade at the time. And they were telling my son, Andrew, all of the things that his grandpa had told them about Andrew and how proud he was of his grandson, Andrew. And my son actually broke down in just kind of being overwhelmed from the emotions of that feeling and this realization of how proud his grandpa was of him. I'll never forget it. And, there's part of me that found joy in that. There's part of me that also felt, Dad, I wish you'd have been able to say that to your kids and to your grandkids yourself. And I wanted to share that today because I know that many of us maybe come from families where that just wasn't done in any significant way. And if that's true in your family, it's time to break the cycle. It's time to break the cycle. Most important thing you can ever tell your kids, honestly, not, you don't make it up, but it's to honestly say, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. And I know that we have, especially at this service, we have lots of people who are separated from their kids, right? A lot of people who have kids who they have some hopes maybe of getting reunited with. I just want to encourage you to step up, my friends. And I have this conversation all the time. What you need to do is just keep doing the right thing. Keep doing what you're doing, and God will work the rest. But when you get together with them, break that cycle. Break that cycle. Pour into your kids, pour into your family, pour into your friends. It's one of the most important things that we can do. We have enough negative messages that tear us down, and lots of people here are speaking them to themselves. It's time to break the cycle. Everyone needs approval. Everyone really wants to be liked. If you say no, you are either lying or circumstances have turned your heart cold. Because everyone needs some validation. John Ortberg has another quote that I wanted to share with you. He writes this on page 162 of his book. He says, psychiatrist David Burns notes that it is not another person's compliment or approval that makes us feel good. Rather, it is our belief that there is validity to the compliment. This is really, really interesting. He goes on, I didn't put this on the screen, but he goes on to say this. Suppose you were to visit the psychiatric ward of a hospital, Burns suggests, and a patient approaches you with this greeting. You are wonderful. I had a vision from God. He told me the 13th person to walk through the door would be a special messenger. You are the 13th, so I know that you are the chosen one, the holy one, the bringer of peace to the world. Let me kiss your shoes. Most likely your sense of self-esteem would not rise. Why not? He says, when I was studying psychology in college, I spent a summer internship at a place called the Spiro Agnew Mental Health Center in Dorchester County. It was in Maryland. One woman there used to tell me regularly that she wanted to marry me because she could not stop thinking about my body. She was heavily medicated, had lived in the facility for 20 years, and would say the same thing to every other member of the staff. On her less lucid days, she would even do the same thing to plants and inanimate objects. It was an outrageous compliment that she could not stop thinking about my body, but she did nothing to enhance my sense of value as a person. He goes on and then he says this, it'll be on the screen. In between other people's opinions of us and our pleasure in them is our assessment of the validity of their approval. We are not the passive victim of others' opinions. The opinions are powerless until we validate them. That's the most important thing. Can you go back to that slide one more time, Mary? That is one of the most important things for somebody here to hear today. That we have a choice in validating the praise and the criticism of the people that we hear. And so how is it that we kind of make ourselves healthier and able to discern what that is? The point is that we can learn to deal with our addiction to approval. You know, we literally have people who come to Celebrate Recovery on Thursday nights with this addiction for approval or self-esteem, self-worth issues. They join step studies and they work through these issues in order to kind of discern how it is to be more easier for them to navigate. Here's the deal: the more at peace you are with yourself, the healthier you are, the easier you're going to be able to navigate the messages that you receive from the world and even in your own head. If you struggle with approval addiction or self-worth or need for validation, I'd like to suggest a few things this morning. And I'm going to do this really quick. We're going to go through these fast because here's the deal. You know them already. Sometimes the most important thing I do is I tell you what you already know. And maybe it validates what it is that you already know that you need to do. Here's the first thing. For some of you, you may need to separate yourself from the false messages. You may need to change the people in your life. And if those voices are in your own head now, chances are you're going to need to get some help. You're going to need to talk to your pastor or to a counselor, but sometimes we need to separate from the negative messages. Here's the deal. If those people, if those voices, if those negative messages are people in your life, you may need to separate from those people, and that's one of the hardest things that I will ever tell you. I've literally told people that one of the best things that you can do right now is counterintuitive. You may need to separate from your spouse because of the messages that you are receiving. You may need to separate from people that you care dearly from. You may need to have less contact with a parent. You may need to somehow separate yourself from somebody that you still love in your heart, but you know that the messages are destroying you. You with me? All right, second thing is sometimes we need to join ourselves to those who speak positive, healthy messages into our lives. And that's one of the most profound things I discovered in the recovery world. When I was beating myself up, I went to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and people there were speaking hope and positive messages into my life. That's something that we try to do here at Lighthouse all of the time. What I'm talking about are messages of unconditional love, unconditional acceptance. Now, I want to be clear, we're not talking about telling us lies. We need to find truth tellers. What they say positively has to be the truth. And so sometimes we need to hear tough things. And so we try to find truth tellers who can do so with grace. That's a person who speaks positive, healthy messages into our lives. Third thing I wanted to mention is you need to find a healthy community. For many people who come to Lighthouse Church, one of the realities is that we need to change the life community in our life. We need to literally change the people that we are hanging with. And so here's the deal. If you keep hanging out with the same people that you used to do what got you here with, you're going to end up doing the same things. And so, we need to sometimes change our life community, whether that's Lighthouse Church or another place. Who are the people that we are hanging out with? Number 4, this is something that John Ortberg writes about quite a bit in his book. He talks about the practice of secrecy. We have this tendency to do good things and then want to tell people about them. Anybody here like that? Let me share with you John chapter 6, verses 3 and 4, where Jesus is speaking. He says this. It'll be on the screen. When you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you. What he's saying is that when we do good things, keep it to ourselves. Resist the need to tell everyone the good that you have done. Let your actions speak for themselves. Not every good thing that you do needs to go out on social media. In some circumstances, we may find times where we want to share with others so that they can celebrate with us. We may want to teach others by showing them something. But generally, the principle is that when we are followers of Jesus, we do something good and we let God know. And that's enough. In fact, John Ortberg even says that if you do something good and you tell everybody about it, it's not going to help you spiritually grow. Remember that we spiritually grow and measure that by if we are growing more in love with God and with other people. And when we tell everybody, it turns our attention to ourselves and not to the good that we have just done. And so, we try to keep it to ourselves. Last thing I wanted to share, number 5, listen to who God says you are. Listen to God. Probably the most important thing, and that's why I took it off the table in a question time. Most important thing you can do is to begin to tell yourself you are who God says you are. You're not the sum of your mistakes. You're not the things that you have done wrong. You're not your jail time, your prison time, your addiction. You are who God says you are. Who does God say you are? He says that you are a chosen child of God, that you have been created in His image, that you are a son or daughter of the Most High, that you are a member of the royal priesthood, redeemed, a masterpiece created by the very handiwork of God. You are of great worth, of great value. You are capable, and you are lovable. Start to tell yourself you are who God says you are. I am who God says I am. I am so grateful for the people in my own life who have kind of taught me those things. There is no greater example of God's approval and love for you and me than what Jesus did on the cross. There was no feeling of approval or at all on Good Friday. No recognition, no social media posts. Good job, Jesus. None of that. It is the ultimate example of self-giving, self-sacrificial love and goodness ever made in humankind. Jesus died for you and for me so that our sins might be forgiven and so that we could experience a new life with God. You know how much you are, how valuable you are, how much you are worth. Look to Jesus on the cross. That's how valuable you are. He laid His body down for you, and His blood was shed for you. On Thursday before Good Friday, Jesus spent an evening with His disciples. They had a Last Supper together. And Jesus said from now on, He wanted His followers to remember His death by gathering around a table and participating in His Last Supper. We call it Holy Communion. And His promise is that when we do, He will be present with us as sure today as He was 2,000 years ago. So you, my friends, are of great worth, and you will hear that if you come to communion today. My body broken for you, my blood shed for you. Would you join me